introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to my sunshiny, beautiful Manhattan day. I'm Billy. I'm the host of Show and Tell. And today I'm bringing you a guest from the UK. But before I do, let me go through my usual. You can find me on Ravelry. I'm going to put my name here, Billy Toy, and on Instagram also as Billy Toy. And just a public service announcement, I'm going to be launching a knit along for a particular 1940s sweater. I'll insert a quick little picture here. If you're interested in knitting along with us, and we will be Zooming so that we can all compare notes and whine when we get to parts of the pattern that we don't understand or that are tripping us up. So if you're interested in joining along with that, go over to my Ravelry group, which is also called Show and Tell. How much easier could I make it? I think that's it. I almost forgot to tell you, I'm sure you're out there wondering, what is this jewelry? It's not her usual vintage. This is vintage. This is big time vintage. This is what used to be called American Indian jewelry. Now, I think the politically correct term is Native American jewelry. These are sterling silver handmade beads. I'm going to get closer so you can see it. And they are strung on chain because this is pretty heavy. Your catgut or dental floss wouldn't support this. This would have been worn by an Indian chief, probably a man. And this type of necklace is called a squash blossom because these little florets are the flowers of a squash plant. This is natural turquoise. It's not dyed. The reason I have this is because my mother back in the 70s had a business of this type of jewelry. So these earrings are hers, this ring, this bracelet, this ring. Actually, this ring was probably purchased by me. We went to some reservations and we're trading. So I have a significant collection of this type of turquoise and coral jewelry. Anyway, without further ado, let's go meet Siobhan. I'm going to say good morning because the sun is shining brightly outside my window. It's not morning for all of you, but without further ado, I'd like to introduce my guest today. I'm going to let her introduce herself because I think it's pronounced Siobhan, even though it's a B. But
well done.
And she's going to tell us how she pronounces her name, where she's from. I think it's the UK, and a little something about the town where she lives. So take it away, Siobhan.
Hello, well done. Yes, indeed, it is pronounced Siobhan. It's Gaelic and Irish means, I believe it means Joan in English. And I live in Washington in the northeast of England. And the amazing thing about where I come from is that it is where George Washington, your first president, his family actually comes from.
Really?
So I'm literally 2 minutes walk away from my house. We enter into Washington Old Town, and the house of your first president's family is still there. It actually originally was built in 1200 and maybe 45 springs to mind, and has grown and grown and grown. And it is now a venue that the National Trust owns, so you can get married there, you can have tours there, but it is an absolutely beautiful, beautiful building. And the new town that I officially live in, Washington New Town, has grown from this tiny little village that, like I say, it's a very small world.
It's so interesting to me. Whenever I bring guests on, I try not to learn too much about them ahead of time because I love surprises. And it's like the most incredible surprise that you would say our president, and actually I'm originally from Philadelphia, which is the seat of our nation. It's where the Declaration of Independence and everything else was signed. The formation of our country happened there. So George Washington was in my hometown.
Well, you will have to have a look online. Google Washington Old Town.
What a wonderful surprise. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that the viewers are going to be excited next time they're in the northern part of the UK to maybe
it's a beautiful, beautiful part of the country anyway. But just to have that connection, and it blows my mind, the fact that this little town in the northeast of England is, you know, where George Washington's family originated. So cool.
Cool. So we were talking about something. Oh yeah. Before we get into the knitting, just before we started this interview, we were talking about double chins. Some of us gals who are over 35
only just
have this issue. And I was telling Siobhan that I had the experience when I was a much younger woman. I had my very first single lens reflex camera, and I had loaded my very first roll of film into that camera. And I happened to go to a movie screening, and who was in the audience but Shelley Winters, because she was in the film that was being screened. And I saw her sitting in the seats, and I went over to her. She was on the aisle. I went over to her and I knelt down beside her to be out of everyone's way. And I said to her, Miss Winters, would it be okay if I took your photograph? And she said, well, who are you? I think she was afraid that I might be from the press or something, because I had this important looking little camera. And I said, I was flummoxed. I didn't know what to say. So I said, I'm no one. Don't worry, I'm no one. So she said, well, if you've never photographed a movie star before, there are a couple of tips I can give you. She said, for one thing, never shoot from down where you are, because I was kneeling beside her. She said, always shoot from above so you don't get my double chins. That was the first tip. The second tip was ask which is your better side. So I learned these two tips from her. Unfortunately, when I had the film developed as a novice, I had not loaded my film in correctly, and I got 0 photographs. So I don't have this picture of Shelley Winters.
But you learned to
but I learned that lesson. So my computer right now is on top of about 4 textbooks, so it's propped up, and I think I have the camera angled down just a little bit, so hopefully you're not seeing any
you look beautiful,
but it's a good tip. It's a good tip for those of you out there who are not young. I am young in my head, and my body feels pretty good, thank goodness, but these are there. Sorry. And especially during the pandemic, I find it's getting even worse, because I'm lying in bed knitting a lot, and I think it's just looking down. Anyway, let's get on to some wonderful vintage knitting. Tell us a little bit about your interest in vintage. Do you have a specific period? Go ahead.
I up until about 4 years ago, I loved the style of the 40s, but didn't really, other than watching films and thinking how wonderful it would be to be like Ginger Rogers, or just the clothing. Absolutely loved it, but didn't really know much about it other than what I saw on the television. And then my partner and I went to an event in a small little town in Yorkshire, Haworth, which is where the Bronte family come from. And every year they do this large vintage event. So 3 years ago, we went for the first time, and I literally fell in love there and then. My entire world changed, literally. And I don't say that lightly. I mean it completely changed. There were the most beautiful, elegant ladies walking around, but then there were ladies like myself, just normal little housewives, but the clothing that they were wearing was just so beautiful and so poignant. And I thought, you know what, I can make something like that for next time for me. I'm gonna find out. which I did, found some knitting patterns, and I literally got the bug. And some people that I had shown my knits to, just to find out whether they thought they were authentic, because a lot of the knitting patterns are quite small sized, so trying to upsize, etc. And they said, you know what, Siobhan, there are people who can't knit and would be really grateful to have somebody like you who can knit. So I put some things on Instagram thinking nothing of it, and oh my goodness.
Really?
Oh my goodness.
Just like that.
Just like that, literally. Anybody who wants to have a look at my Instagram account, my Lilybell Knits account, you'll see that it's only a few years old, but the amount of knits that I've made from just wonderful ladies and some gentlemen, but mainly ladies, who have contacted me and said, you know, would it be possible if, could you do this in, or I'm a larger lady, would it be possible if? And that's where I've really found it's important to me that it isn't just a size 10 glamorous lady who wears vintage knits. We are all different shapes, all different sizes. And I think it is really important that for all the knitting pattern might be a size 10, it might be a size 12. If I can upsize it for somebody, then I will do my utmost to do so, because everybody should be able to feel that glamorous, and be able to feel that they are every bit as glam as somebody who's a lot younger or a lot thinner.
What's the price range?
For me, it depends a lot on the yarn. I don't purchase any yarn. I ask the ladies or the gents who are asking me to knit for them. We'll discuss what kind of yarn they would like, and then they purchase the yarn. So if you're looking at an acrylic yarn, it's a lot cheaper than obviously an organic yarn.
No, but it's your time. It's your time,
yeah,
and your expertise. So I know you're factoring that in. So like, what if somebody was using a very inexpensive, well, they're purchasing the yarn, so the yarn's not factored in.
For example, this knit is made from yarn that I bought from a charity shop. So I think I paid about £6 or £7 for the yarn in total. But if I was making this for somebody to pay me to knit, I would charge £50 for the actual knitting of this jumper. It's short sleeve, it's simple, you know, it's only this section here that has got the detail, whereas something like this, which is really intricate on really fine needles, hand knitted lace effectively, lots of detail in the collar, that I would be charging £70 for, on top of what the yarn would cost. But for me, it's not even about the money. I do this because I love it, and it's not about me earning hundreds of pounds per jumper. And that's another thing that I'm very conscious of, that a lot of people, these are investment pieces, these are pieces that lots of ladies take a very long time to decide what they would actually like made, and they might change their mind half a dozen times, and that is absolutely fine. And this is what I stress to people, that when you're spending this amount of money on an item, you're not going to wear it just once. It needs to have longevity, and that's the whole point of, you know, do and mend, the vintage theme, that you're making something that will see you through a long time, or you're unpicking it and you're making something else, so nothing gets wasted.
It seems like a bargain, because if they bring you cashmere for the same 70 or 80 pounds, they're going to have a short sleeve cashmere sweater, same price as the person who's giving you acrylic yarn. So that seems really great. Now, you mentioned your Instagram account, and I will put that in the show notes and maybe on the screen, but do you have an Etsy page?
No, I don't.
How are you selling? Only people find you through Instagram and then they contact you?
I knit to order. I don't knit. Well, occasionally I've knitted things for myself and I thought, oh, you know what, it either doesn't fit or it doesn't feel right. Sometimes you get excited by the pattern, and then when you made it, you think, actually, no, that's not really me at all. So that I will sell on. However, I work full time as well. So I'm a retail manager. So I work 45 hours a week on average. And knitting for me is my relaxation. My partner works late shifts. So there are some months that we maybe would only have a week together where we're sort of in the house for more than an hour or two at the same time. So I do the knitting as a relaxation. So I really do just knit to order. Somebody can contact me on Instagram. I get messages all the time. And I'm very open about the cost as well. I think people who don't knit or see it as a fashion statement, whereas for me this isn't fashion. It is fashion, but it's a lifestyle. It's the majority of the ladies that I knit for dress vintage. That is their style, and so these are investment pieces. So I like to be very open about it. And a lot of ladies say, oh, it was a little bit more expensive than I was thinking, because I think yarn is expensive, especially if you're using organic material. So that's literally how I knit. I've got orders coming in all of the time, and I just work through. There's no priority. It's no, and I'm very open with people that I do work. So some weeks I'll do lots of knitting. Other weeks it'll be slower if things are stressful at work, or I've got to do things, prep for things for work as well. But it's my pleasure time. It gives me so much pleasure seeing ladies and gents wearing knits. And sometimes I see a picture of somebody wearing something that I've made. I think, how on earth did I do that? Because I haven't picked the pattern. I've had a pattern sent, or I've had a request. And I'm sure you yourself will at times look at something and think, like, well, how did I do it? How on earth did I do that? But in the moment, I'll say to people, all I'm doing is reading the instructions that fabulous ladies, mainly in the 30s and 40s, wrote down, and sometimes they're quite tricky to understand. But yes, all I'm doing is following their instructions. That's all I'm doing. It's knit one, purl one.
I think a lot of people watching have had that experience of looking at the instructions and struggling to make heads or tails of it.
Yeah. And I have had some amazing support. There are some fantastic ladies that have helped me on my Instagram journey. I've had so many people answer queries and be really generous with their time and really supportive. Pointed me in the right direction, told me how things may work better, or where I may be able to find the answer if they can't give the answer. So just the whole essence of the vintage knitwear scene on Instagram for me is just been an amazing new chapter for myself. And I've met so many amazing people that I call friends now.
Are you also on Ravelry?
No, I'm not. I do use Ravelry, but I just don't have time to dedicate, sort of, by the time I've made a garment, I'm ready to start the next garment. And afterwards I think, oh, I should have put it on here, or I should have taken photographs. But I'm mainly interested in getting that garment to that person who its new owner, and to see it being worn and being enjoyed, and just seeing how the person wearing it feels amazing when they put that garment on that they've chosen the colours, they've chosen the yarn, they've specified the measurements, and like I say, all I'm doing is following the basic pattern.
How many measurements do they have to provide you? Like,
generally, the sweaters, the bust size is kind of standard. I can work things, I can widen things if necessary. It's mainly the length, because the old patterns, the vintage patterns from the 40s, especially because yarn was so expensive and hard to get, everything was a lot shorter. So on average now, the ladies that I knit for, the body length is sort of 15 inches, whereas on the original patterns, you're looking at 12 and a half. Oh. So it's really important that when I'm discussing with with people who have commissioned a knit that they do spend the time to get the correct measurements, because if I follow the pattern, unless you are 5'2" and a set a UK size 8 to 10, then that jumper isn't gonna fit.
What about shoulder width? Like for me,
yeah,
I have a bigger waist and bigger hips, but my shoulders are kind of narrow. I would think that would be an important measurement. Is that a measurement that you get?
Yes, especially if you are doing like the boxed sleeve top. I find that if you haven't got the width correct, the boxed sleeve is down here, so you need to have the correct width. It doesn't always work, I have to be honest. You know, I have a good friend, Sam, who gets a lot of knitwear. She is passionate about knitwear, and she has quite sloped shoulders, so I have to, from experience now where mistakes have been made and we've had to adapt things, it is really important that the style of the sleeve matches the client as well, because not everybody can wear a big box sleeve, or some people want really puffy sleeves which look fabulous, but they don't always suit everybody. It just sometimes is too much. So it is trial and error, and that's again where I do stress to people that these are expensive garments that they are having made by the time you put the cost of the wool and the shipping, because I do knit a lot for the States, so it's quite expensive to send things. So I just want things to be right for that person. And I will advise, and if I feel really strongly that it's not right, I have refused to make things in the past, because I don't think it's fair to the person to be disappointed, but also it's kind of my reputation. I don't want people to be wearing things that don't look good on them,
sure,
if possible.
Sure.
You know, I think it's sometimes you have to be cruel to be kind.
It's true. It's true. So what do you have that you're going to show us? I see on the mannequin you could talk about, and then there's some things in the background that you're going to speak to.
So this this knit is also made from charity shop yarn, but it is vintage. I think when I looked it up, it was from the late 40s. But the pattern itself came from a book that I found in a really old, well, a very, very old charity shop up in Scotland. And inside the book, when I opened it, I fell in love with this knit, this knitted lace, but also there were lots of dress patterns that had been cut out of magazines and things, so that book itself was just absolutely amazing. I've also got in the background the Fair Isle knit, which for me, the tank top, that just epitomises wartime knitwear. But it is not my forte, I have to say, and it is something that I've been asked to make several times for people, and I've said I can't do it again. It was just Fair Isle is I wouldn't say a chore, but it's definitely a challenge for me. It does not come naturally, because the style that I knit in is that I have I don't use circular needles, and I don't use 4 needles. I have it's a form where you anchor your knitting needle under your arm. So I have one under my arm, and then this arm is very free. So that doing Fair Isle really hinders you, if I'm honest. So that was a labour of love, but it was a labour of love for myself. But I think the form of knitting that I do is very much associated with the pit villages of the northeast of England, so I've been told. So because the ladies, just the way that they were taught, and that in the northeast of England is a very popular method. Very few people knit on circular.
Do you have your knitting close at hand that you could show us?
I'm sure I can find something of my actual knits downstairs. So.
Well, I normally don't ask, but this.
So I'm doing 2 sleeves at the same time, just because there are a lot of bobbles in this. So the method that I use is, and I buy longer needles as well. So these are 40 centimetre needles rather than the bog standard 25. So nice chunk under my arm.
I'm going to have to convert that. It looks longer than the longest needles that I have. I mean, not
yeah,
circular,
they are.
The longest straight needles
they
I
are
have.
They're just under half a metre. So 45 centimetres.
So half a metre, that's 39 by 2, so 19 and a half inches. That's
yeah, they are long. But also it means that you can get lots of stitches at the same time. So yeah, I anchor under my arm. And then this arm is the one that wiggles about a lot, gets on everybody's nerves, and I'm there. And the reason, apparently, and I could be wrong, I mean, people may be able to tell me differently, but apparently in the pits, when they were knitting like this, they could then keep everything in one hand, do whatever they needed to do on the stove, stir the stove, do whatever, and then straight back to the knitting.
Bring your hands up or turn your camera a little bit down so that we have a better view. You can't sit on an airplane and do this.
No. Definitely not.
That's a much better view. Wow.
So,
and it's fast. It looks like it's pretty quick.
It is very quick. And again, that is part of the method, that it is a very quick way, because you are so sort of static here that you're whizzing. Plus I am a fast knitter, I have to say, but it just gives you this stability. But I cannot knit on circular needles. I can't do it. So yeah,
well, we're even, because I don't think I could do that. If I learned, I mean, if somebody taught me how to do that, yeah, perhaps. But I think you get to a certain point in your life, if you've been knitting a certain way for 30 years, or in my case, let's see, it's about 62 years. I wasn't knitting the same way all of those years, because I was converted from English to continental when I was about 5 or 6. But my earliest knitting experience, I was throwing. I mean, it's like a baby way of learning or teaching somebody to knit. I was very young, and that's how my mother knit, so she taught me. But I've mentioned this before, one of her friends got a hold of me and taught me to do continental. And now I've been knitting that way for over 60 years. It's like I'm conditioned to learn a different way. Would be like, you know, if you've always eaten with your right hand, now try and eat with your left hand, cut your food in a different way.
And I just think, why change it?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, unless you have an injury, like my last guest, she's got tennis elbows, so she's trying to learn Portuguese knitting, where you hang something around your neck. I don't know. It's using different muscle groups.
Right.
So yes, if you have to, but I think it's so fascinating what you're saying, that they could stir the pot while they were knitting. I'm talking about multitasking. I think I'm doing great if I'm watching a movie and knitting at the same time, cooking and knitting.
Able to follow the plot.
That's a whole other level.
You've got ladies, the fishing villages, they use another technique where they have a cushion in front of them, skirt for fish on their back, and again the knitting would stop, do whatever they do, and they would walk and knit as they were walking.
I've seen that. I've seen images of that. I've seen old prints from like shepherds. They're walking with
That's
their
right,
and they're even on stilts or something. Maybe I'll find that picture and insert it here. Very interesting.
Definitely. it's amazing. I don't think I could walk and knit at the same time, and especially when we're doing such complicated patterns. But like you say, if that's the only thing you've ever known, then it's just second nature, isn't it?
Right, right. So I imagine that Fair Isle in the back, it's done on a pretty fine needle.
Yes, that is UK size 12 for the ribbon, and then 10 for the body. And
I have a conversion chart. I'm going to look that up.
Slightly larger than the pattern. Yeah, I don't know what that would be in UK, but in Old English for money it was 12 and 10. But this one, the main body of this is knitted on a UK size 12, so that is really fine needles.
Hang on a second. My computer is telling me that my internet is unstable. I want to change my network. One sec.
No problem. Okay.
So just to explain to my guests, I have a very unusual living situation, as many people in Manhattan do. We have two apartments. One is upstairs and one is downstairs. And because our son often resides downstairs, we have our modem and our router in the downstairs apartment. So from where I'm sitting, if you could cut through the floor diagonally, I would say it's maybe 35, under 40 feet. It's not always a terrific connection. However, just maybe 6 feet away is my neighbor. We're separated by a plaster wall. And he's a doll. He's a doll. I know him for over 30 years. He has hooked us up so that sometimes, if necessary, we can jump onto his network. So I just wanted to see if I was on his network, because that's much closer than my own modem and router. But I don't know why it's telling me I'm unstable. Hopefully we don't get interrupted. So sorry to interrupt that flow. So I will get the conversion of what size those needles are, but just looking at it from here, which is far away, it looks like it's probably very teensy, maybe smaller than the needle of what you're wearing.
Oh yes, this is UK size 8 needle for the main body, because with the Fair Isle doing onto anything too small, it becomes too tight. So I did use a UK size 8.
The one that's in the back, it's a higher number needle, but that means it's finer.
Yes, yeah, but because there are fewer, so it was much easier to knit. Whereas this one, because the wool's a little bit thicker, again, it was a charity shop wool. It was wool that was probably from about the 60s. So I didn't want to make it too tight so that it didn't break. I was concerned that it was quite fragile.
Is it portable? Can you bring it closer to the camera so we can get a close-up view? Or...
The Fair Isle, of course I can. So it is worn, most definitely worn. But this is my go-to sweater if I'm having a day where I think, I don't quite know what to wear, but want to feel smart. Pair of brown tweed pants, blouse, and this sweater. And these are all my kind of colours. I'm very autumnal. It's definitely, this was specifically made for myself. I decided that I was having some time for me on this one. But it's a very popular pattern. You can find this, I think I got it free actually on Pinterest. So if you type in, I think I just put in Fair Isle tank top, ladies Fair Isle tank top, and this is one of the first ones that popped up. And it's quite close to the colours on the pattern itself. But the majority of my patterns are packed away at the moment because we're in the middle of moving. We're in a rental house while we're waiting for our house sale to complete. So it's a little bit chaotic, to say the least.
Oh, that's wonderful to behold. Wow. Do you have any idea how long it took you to knit that?
I know exactly how long it took me to knit. It took me, oh, I'm embarrassed to say now because people say, what? But I am a fast knitter, and it was in first lockdown, so I wasn't doing anything at all. And it took me 4 days.
4 days? I thought you were going to say, it took me 4 months. My husband was going to, 4 days.
But I was getting up in the morning and just knitting for like 10 hours a day. So really, it would be about 40 hours.
I can't knit chunky yarn a full sweater in 4 days.
But on average, for me, a jumper would not take more than a week. For my clients, that's a week to 10 days. If I'm not working, if I'm working full time, then I will normally say it'll be a couple of weeks, and that just gives me that time to get the sewing up done and all the finishing off done. But I am a fast knitter, I have to say. People who watch me, they'll say that it's fascinating because my hands are going so quickly. But I've just had my 50th birthday, and I learned to knit when I was 4. And my Instagram account name, Lily Bell Knits, is in dedication to my 2 aunts who taught me to knit. They were professional knitters. So Auntie Lily and Auntie Bell taught me to knit, and that is my homage to them. But they were incredibly fast, super duper fast. But they'd both been nurses. Sort of during the Second World War, because I'm from a large family, and I'm the youngest of all of it. And so my parents were in their 40s, late 40s when they had me, and my dad's one of 9 children, so my aunties, they were elderly when I was 4, but they used to sit on either side of the fireplace. They each had a chair on either side of the fire, and I would alternate between the two, being shown how to do different techniques. And if one was doing something they needed to get done, then the other aunt would supervise and tell me where I was going wrong, or sort of correct all of those loops that were at the age of 4 were gradually going down. But yeah, that's very, very special to me that their names live on through what I'm doing now, and the love of what they did.
I've often mentioned on this channel my Aunt Matilda, my mother's sister, who unfortunately passed away at a very early age, I think 42. She was an unbelievable knitter, and I've shown some of her things in one of my very early episodes of Show and Tell. But I did not learn to knit from her. In fact, she never even tried to influence me or show me. I didn't spend a great deal of time with her, but I do remember being with her on occasions when she was knitting unbelievable things with a sequin in every other stitch, full like fish scale suits. And well, I showed a dress that has checkerboard sequin, plain wool checkerboard. It's fantastic. But teensy needles, very fine yarn, and impeccable seams and hems. The inside is as magnificent as the outside. You could wear these things inside out and they would still be great. So yeah, the ants. Well, maybe someday people will be talking about their Aunt Dilly or their Aunt Siobhan.
Well, I've got lots of nieces and nephews, but none of them knit. None of them knit. But it's strange because I'm one of 7 children, and there's only one of my sisters who knits, and she doesn't knit. For her, it's knitting for our grandchildren. It's her pleasure to give them something, because they live in New Zealand and she is in the UK, so it's a labour of love for her to send the children something that she's made, and that is something. I mean, I don't know about yourself, but everything that I make, there is a little bit of me in there. I think people who do knit, or well, with any craft, when you're handing something over that you've made, you are giving something of yourself with it, and I that's why I never want to make something that I think will make somebody look maybe not the best, or you know, when they're wearing something that I've made, I want them to feel the love, and I want them to know that it was made because I wanted to make it, not because I was being paid to make it. It really isn't about the money. Don't get me wrong, the money, you know, is a bonus, but I can't think of anything worse than knitting something that I hate making just because I'm thinking, oh well, there's a little bit of cash at the end of it. It's not what it's about at all.
I think most people would feel that.
I think
way.
you can tell. Yeah, I think you can tell when you're making something that you're not really enthusiastic about. It lacks something, and I don't know. Why would I want to make something for somebody that I haven't enjoyed? Because I want them to feel that love when they put it on, and hopefully everybody does.
Do you have anything else that you want to show us?
I'll show you one more that's really popular because I get asked to make it a lot.
Okay.
Everybody will know this pattern. Dun, dun, dun. So yeah, this was made last year, again during first lockdown, and I made it for myself, and it doesn't fit. But I can't bring myself to sell it because I love it so much. I keep thinking it will eventually fit me, but you see what I mean about the body length. I mean, that is just crazy short, and that was part of the problem, because when I put this on, it's more like a belly top than it is a jumper. So but that was knitted to the size of the pattern rather than me taking my own measurements.
Will you hold it up really close to the camera so we can see the stitch? It looks like there's something twisting going on in there. Drop stitches?
It's literally a slip stitch. It's just a slip stitch. Yeah. So you're literally knitting and slipping one stitch in 3, and then you just continue slipping that stitch through your next colour. So it's really not complicated. I would honestly, if anybody wants to make something but they're not a confident knitter but wants to make something that looks really authentic, because this is an authentic pattern, it is such an easy stitch to do, but it looks so effective. I mean, the colours that I've seen this jumper made by other ladies, it's just fantastic. In fact, on my Instagram account, there's a version of it. A lady wanted it in just 2 colours, and I've always knitted it in 3, sometimes more actually. I think the pattern itself uses 5, but she wanted it in 2 colours, and it was rose pink and green, and it is so effective. It looks like herringbone stitch, beautiful, and the colour choice that she made was perfect, not something that I would ever have thought of putting together myself. But honestly, if somebody is, like I say, able, if you can knit and you can purl, you can do that jumper, and it's really effective.
Come back with that so that we can see the buttons. The buttons, are they vintage?
They are, yes. They were actually, I know they're vintage because I came from an item of my mum's clothing. So my mum's in her 90s. And she had some knitwear that used to belong to her mum, I think. And it was just on it beyond repair. There was nothing that could be done with it, but the buttons came off, and I was like, I know where they're going. So
they're
actually,
the perfect color.
Well, the buttons came before the jumper, so the colours were purchased to match the 2 buttons. But they were really important buttons.
People have heard me say I buy the hat first and then knit the sweater to match the hat, because it's easy to find, well, somewhat easy to find yarns the right color. It's much harder to find a scarce hat that's got the right colors.
Exactly. Yeah. No, it's but yeah, that's another thing with all of the knits. I don't put modern buttons on. I purchase vintage buttons. There's a couple of ladies that I've purchased from the minute I started knitting the vintage style, so I tend to go with the the same ladies. One unfortunately isn't selling anything at the moment, just having a break. So but I do have a lot of buttons. I have to say, I love buying buttons. You will find me raking in charity shops. I would buy garments just for the buttons as well. And that's another tip that I would say, if people are sort of struggling to, because so again can be quite expensive, go to charity shops, rake through. Doesn't matter what the garment looks like, look at the buttons, and I've found some amazing things. And you're talking a few English pounds for maybe 6-8 buttons rather than £1 per button if you're going really all out in regards to purchasing.
Do you have a special way of storing them so that you can find them, or are they just in the jar?
What they're in grandma tins, aren't they? They are in just boxes, tins. I don't have any to hand, actually. They're all packed away. I only kept out the ones that I knew I was going to be needing for the jumpers that I'm making now. But yeah, they're just, everybody's grandma has that tin that's got tape measures in and old buttons and pins, and that's what.
So you just remember your inventory in your head. If you need a teal colored button,
I'm not that organized. I also just have to go through the tins and see what's in the tins, and then if there's nothing in the tins, then I'll buy. I'm not that organized when it comes to buttons, but every time I'm looking to see if I've got anything suitable, I always find something that I'd forgotten about, or I didn't know that I had, or it brings back a memory, thinking, oh crap, I know where I got those ones from. I remember when I bought those, you know, when we go to Scotland quite a lot on holiday, and the memories of some of the antique shops and some of the charity shops. Every little button that you find, it's got a story to tell. So I quite enjoy not having them that organized, that I just go to that color drawn, it's there. It just, like I say, evokes the memories.
I think this is a perfectly good place to wrap it up, unless there's something else that you want to share.
I don't think so. I've had a lovely time.
Oh, wonderful. It was a joy to meet you and to see the few things that you've shared with us. I'll try and put things in the notes so that people can find you. And
yeah,
I think at those coolie wages, people are going to come rushing. But I think it's only fair to say that maybe these will not be the prices, you know, inflation and supply and demand. I mean, don't be disappointed.
Every item. Every item is discussed on an individual basis.
Right. I didn't mean to paint the picture that for 70 pounds, she will do anything. It seems like,
no.
You know, if it comes in at twice that, don't beat me up. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I'm hoping that I'm going to see you again soon.
Hopefully. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.